Well, the
Yeah.
sine wave is what it's the anti-old school, basically. Old school says, oh, you transfer your weight from the back foot to the front foot and you drive your racket forward. That is mechanical and kind of an ugly way to play, and some can do it better than others. But generally speaking, when they say, you don't try to teach someone like Roger Federer, what Roger Federer does is his his arm flows off of his body in this standing wave, in this natural way to play. And I think it really, we use the word fundamentals, and I hate to be so tacky, but damn, our fundamentals really do put the fun back in fundamentals. I mean, that's when I started cracking balls, when I started to realize, oh, wow. And that's why I had to make those blueprints that you put on the court. I'm just
They make
like,
a huge difference.
oh,
Huge
huge,
difference. Yeah.
huge. I make every student, I don't care how good or bad they are, I make them drop feed forehands, and I'll hand feed them backhands if they're two-hander. If they're one-hander, I let them drop feed. And I make them hit baskets because for two reasons. Number one, to understand how it is your arm moves off your body, number one. And number two, under pressure, if it's all about you, you feel the pressure. Oh, I don't want mom to be, disappointed. I don't want my girlfriend to think I'm a klutz. It takes it away from you, and you're like, no, I just live into these blueprints that are perfect. So once you've hit against, and you had those blueprints on the court, and you use them, and you actually can visualize them when you play. One of my students, Karen, she played 3 or 4 for Wake Forest, and she had a full ride and was a good player and nationally ranked junior. And she would literally tell me every time I get nervous or my coach would walk by, right? Because that's what makes you nervous in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Tell me about it.
and yeah, because the coach is just there basically with a notepad ready to put you at number 5 and bring the 5 guy up to number 3. And that's the one thing none of us liked. And she'd say every time he would be there, and she said the pressure was more playing people on her own team than other teams. She said I would visualize it. She said there probably wasn't a match that would go by that I wouldn't see those lines, especially on an easy ball, one that you can really blow it on. She goes, I'd make sure to see that, that concave and convex, and I could see those lines. So that's one of the reasons I really push the blueprints, because they really explain exactly what it is with that sine wave. And yeah, I think that's the game changer. And that's what people don't understand when I talk about Federer as my poster boy of this system. They're like, oh, you can't teach to play like Roger. Well, absolutely you can, but you have to think in nonlinear terms. You can't think of, I'm going to get my racket and weight back here and transfer it over there. It just won't work. You have to understand the ins and outs of the figure eight and how that sine wave plays off. Sine wave is just a natural phenomenon. It's actually a standing wave. But when you have a rope and you keep one end stationary and you move the other end without stopping, which means you're in a figure eight of some sort, right? Because you're not stopping. So you're rounding the corners. It creates this standing wave, this phenomenon. And it's really a brilliant thing. And it's used in tennis if you really know what to look for. You see the players, they go into this coil, right? They go into concave part of the coil. And then as their hips come around, it goes out into this part, right, of the sine wave. So you go concave to convex, and it's all done very gradually in a very analog way. So there are nothing's extreme about it. It's just natural. By keeping your hips in a continuous figure eight, it makes the arm go concave to convex out to the 45-degree angle. And that's the sine wave we talk about, and it's the same on the backhand. It's not as easy to see. People think they see the players taking their rackets back, but really what they see is the body turning and them getting into this concave part of the sine wave. And then as their hips come around, you see right back here, it switches to convex, and they make contact right there and bump the ball at contact, whether it's a two-hander or a one-hander. So on the ground strokes, it's really important to understand this standing wave or this sine wave that you create with the continuous slow movements of your hips. So I talk about this sine wave, which is the third fundamental and tenet in our system. Right? There's the 45, the figure 8, and then this thing I talk about called the sine wave. What the sine wave is it's a small piece of the standing wave. So how a standing wave is produced, it's produced with a continuous motion. So you can see a standing wave in things like a flag waving in the wind, or that exercise you see in the gym where they have those heavy ropes. They're moving their hands continuously like this and not stopping. And that creates this standing wave, which is a very perfect waveform. And it's produced naturally by this, like I said, continuous motion, this figure 8. And so the sine wave represents just a small piece of that standing wave. So why do we think it's better to use the sine wave than any other form of teaching tennis? You know, let's say point to point, racket back to follow through. Well, one reason we feel the sine wave is so much better is because it's much easier on your body. I mean, if you've ever noticed, most tennis players are pretty skinny because they don't have to be bodybuilders to hit the ball hard. It's a rare sight when you see a big blocky tennis player like a Tsonga or Wawrinka. They don't come around as much as Sampras and Sinner and Federer, right? And the reason is because you don't have to be that terribly strong to hit the ball. So it's much easier on your body to let your racket move naturally in this sine wave than to force it with any one part of your body. And the beauty of the sine wave is when you use it correctly and you stay lined up, you absorb the hit with your entire body as opposed to just one piece of your body. So it's much, much easier on your body to play with this figure 8 and the sine wave concepts. The sine wave is really the essence of the stroke. I mean, when you go in and out with your figure 8 and you line up your 45-degree angle, it is literally right here. This is what no one seems to know in tennis. You hear the term hit through the ball or swipe across the ball. But really, the ball is hit off of this convex part of the sine wave. So as you come in and out of your sine wave, you make contact right there. That's why some pros will tell you to lay your fingers back or lag. But here at the Nonlinear School, we don't want to be that vague. We want to be precise. So it's not just a lag, it's a lag so you follow this perfect sine wave. And then here at contact, you can direct the ball to go straight, but if you catch the ball a little bit over here, look at that. Now it's going to go cross court. So the beauty of the system is at the 45 with this sine wave, you can change the direction of the ball with the smallest movement, and you can do it at the last second. So if you see your opponent moving to one side or the other, you can at the last second decide, oh, I'm not going to go down the line, I'm going to go cross court. And it's the most finite movement right there at the convex part of this sine wave that changes the direction of the ball. So the sine wave is basically made up of two parts that are seamlessly put together. And one is concave, and then it travels into convex. So you can see it concave here in the beginning, and at contact, you're actually going convex. So when they talk about a coil, or when you hear the word coil, that's when you're going into your concave part of the stroke, right? As soon as your center is starting to turn, see how the last thing it grabs is the racket head. And that makes everything round. And then it seamlessly goes from this concaved or coiled position as my hips come around the corner and through the middle, and then the racket goes to this convex position, stretching away from me, which is why you find a lot of players finishing over their heads, because they don't go to the ball, they go concave, and they merge with the ball at the 45-degree angle, and so many of them will finish on the wrong side of their head. I always find it really interesting, certain players, they sort of live in this concave, mode. You look at a guy like Kyrgios, he walks around and he's always sucked in here, and everything's always concave towards the hit, and he's like this. So, and then when he serves, he's like this. He's always in this first part of the stroke, the coil. And you'll see a lot of players will do that. But yes, the idea of concave to convex comes from this sine wave that I talk about. So you see different elevations in the stroke. Some players will rise a little higher, some will stay a little more in the horizontal. It really doesn't matter because it depends on the ball you're hitting, it depends on the surface you're playing on, and it depends on the speed that's coming at you, or topspin or slice, whether you rise higher or lower. But the fact is, your sine wave just changes with the ball. So think of these things as concepts. You don't have to go here to here every time. The stroke is not the same every time, though the fundamentals always stay the same. So when you see different style players, don't think, oh, I've got to brush from low to high or slice high to low. It's a little more complex than that, a lot more interesting than that. And it does change. You'll see players change not only their strokes, where they'll have a tighter sine wave and a smaller sine wave, but you'll also see them change the way they contact the ball. At contact with this convex part, they can slide across like this and give it a little side spin. They can come up. They can do a lot of things. Even at the last minute, they can decide, oh, I've got all this, maybe I'll throw in a little slice. So you can do a lot of little fine tuning right at contact. So you learn which stroke to use for what ball, what you want to do. But remember, these are all concepts, so it doesn't have to be point A to point B. It's just a feeling and an understanding you get with the sine wave. You hear me use the word round a lot, and that's our system. Our system is a round system. It's all made of curves. So with this rounded system, you go into it round, you see? I turn the racket in my arm into something that's round as opposed to something that's straight. And then as I go into the stroke, my sine wave keeps it rounded or convex. As you see here, it keeps it rounded on the other side. So you really want to understand that it's always in terms of roundness. You hear them talk about Federer and they say, oh, he has circles, he makes circles. Yes, it looks very circular when a beautiful player plays. So keep in mind that it's always a rounded stroke on the way back in the sine wave and on the way forward. If all you do is just pay attention, you will be consistent, not only on that day, but on a day-to-day basis. You will feel like you basically can get in the zone every time you step on the court. And this sine wave is a part of it. If I line up the shot and I keep my hips continuous and I let my sine wave play naturally off the hips, nothing changes. So all you really have to do is pay attention. You don't have to try hard or give it your all. You just have to concentrate and pay attention, and you will play the same pretty much every day, and you'll feel pretty much like you've got your own zone that you play in every day, and you don't have to hope to one day be in the zone in a big match when you need it. You're always in the zone if you just pay attention. Our system in this sine wave, it not only gives you more power, more depth, more control, more touch, and more spin, it makes you much more consistent. All you really have to do is pay attention. I never tell my kids to try hard, because it's not about trying hard. This is not, lifting a weight. This is playing tennis, which is a very fine sport. It uses all the fine muscles in the core out to your little muscles in the hand. And you get consistent if you pay attention. If you pay attention to your lineup, if you pay attention to your hips staying continuous and your arm moving from concave to convex, and if you can lock those things in, you're much more consistent. So all the real effort is done up here in the mind, not really in the body. You just have to tell your body what to do and make it happen. But you don't have to give it any more oomph or any more force. You can do it very gently. You don't have to have a mentality of some players that are just pumped up. You can be a very quiet and calm player. And if your personality is such where you like to get pumped up, that's fine if that helps you, but It doesn't really matter in the system. It's just follow the fundamentals, and you'll be very, very consistent on a daily basis. You won't have good days and bad days. They'll all be great days. Another thing about having a rounded stroke and understanding the sine wave is it's the exact same, it's the same science as cracking the whip, right? You move your hand in a figure eight, and as it gets closer to the tip of the whip, it gets very, very, very quick, infinitely quick. And it actually, that snap you hear breaks the sound barrier. That's what you hear. And that same thing can be applied with this sine wave in tennis. You get the finest and the deftest touch out here as you round the corner, and you have much better touch than coming straight at the ball and trying to use your will to make it go deep or make it go short or hit the angle. Instead, you use the actual science of the natural athlete that helps make you deadly precise and deadly efficient. And right here at the tip of the iceberg, right there, that's where you can lay into it and hit a little drop shot. Or that's where you can decide, no, I'm going to keep going and make the ball go deeper, or put a little bit more spin at the last second. So because this nonlinear system really, really gives you the sharpness of the cracking of a whip and a natural athlete. So why is rounded better? Well, round is better because it's stronger, right? When you take a flat piece of paper and you push down on it, it's easy to crumble. But if you curve that piece of paper and try to push down, it's much, much stronger. And you'll find that on every stroke. One of the great things about this sine wave and this rounded stroke is that you actually make contact with the ball differently. When you come at the ball, you literally collide with the ball. And it's very hard to feel the spin or to even change the spin at the last second. When you're going after it in this sine wave, you can actually massage the ball, right? And you can change by a little bit or a lot at the last second because you're actually feeling the ball on your strings. And it's a much, much better feeling actually on the hit than colliding with the ball. So the sine wave in hitting every ball feels better. It literally feels better. And like I said, it's easier to control the ball. You almost feel like you're grabbing it and throwing it as opposed to just colliding with the ball. The reason I invented this, it's called the Xcaliber, because I really feel like this is the holy grail of the swing, is because I've always explained about the sine wave and how it comes off the figure eight as it comes off from your core, right? From the inside going out. Right? You move your hips in a figure eight and it creates this beautiful sine wave. But I wanted players to understand this system, this sine wave, from the outside in. So you can see the curved face on this Xcaliber, on this stick. And that curved face matches up with the curve of contact. That's where you make contact with the ball. So you can see it works perfectly as I go out to the hit. As long as I stay behind the 45, as I go into my sine wave, I make beautiful contact with the ball. And all depending on if I hit it here, it's going to go inside out that way. If I hit it here, it's going to go cross court. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, but you really learn that you can't just come towards the ball. So I really want to use this sine wave and go out towards that red arrow in a beautiful sine wave to make good contact with the ball. Well, contrary motion, you really had to look for, but it's basically how the hips pull the arm into play, like a dog wagging its tail, right? The tail doesn't wag the dog. It's the dog's core that moves the tail back and forth. And, you can see it. You can see it in nature. You see it in sailing. You see it in a flag blowing in the wind, right? It hits the small part of the closest to the pole. And then as it goes out further, the rest of it catches up. But as the rest of it catches up, the part closest to the pole moves the other way. And you can see that in the luff of a sail. It's just another one of those things where you don't see it until you're looking for it. But you certainly see it in the players if you're looking for it. You see how their hips lead the stroke in both directions, right? going into the coil and then coming back into the hit. So it's quite natural, and it's something that people don't generally look for. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You know that's the way to play.